The morning light of Zelaris Prime cast rainbow patterns through the crystal towers of the capital city. The Zelani people moved gracefully through their gleaming streets, their translucent bodies catching and reflecting the sunlight in brilliant displays of color. They had built their civilization on principles of harmony and peace, never knowing the brutal reality of war that plagued so many other worlds. High above the crystal spires, in the orbital command center, Communications Director Vexhai watched the approaching ships with growing horror. The dark vessels moved in perfect formation, their hulls scarred black from countless battles. The Korthic Dominion had arrived. Vexhai's crystalline fingers trembled as she activated the emergency broadcast system. The quantum communication array hummed to life, sending signals across the galaxy at speeds that defied conventional physics. Her voice, translated into hundreds of languages, carried desperate hope to every corner of known space. This is Zelaris Prime to all civilized worlds. We are under attack by the Korthic Dominion. Our people have never known war. We have no weapons, no armies, no knowledge of combat. We are 1 billion souls facing extinction. She paused, watching as the first Korthic destroyers entered their outer atmosphere. Explosions bloomed like deadly flowers where the orbital defense stations tried to resist. We offer everything we have to anyone who will help us. Our energy synthesis technology, our medical advances, our entire scientific database. We ask not for conquest or control, but simply for the chance to live. Please, someone answer. The transmission spread outward, carried by relay stations and communication hubs throughout the galaxy. It reached the golden halls of the Asari Confederation first, where elegant beings with elongated heads and flowing robes gathered in emergency session. The Zelani offer valuable technology, said Counselor Thesara, her voice melodic but cold. But the cost of fighting the Korthic would be enormous. Our treasury is already strained from the border conflicts with the hegemony. They speak of 1 billion lives, protested a younger counselor. Numbers on a screen? Thesara replied dismissively. The galaxy has seen countless civilizations rise and fall. We cannot save them all. The Asari Council voted within the hour. They would send thoughts and prayers, but no ships dot in the mechanical depths of the Nexus Collective. Artificial intelligences processed the Zelani plea with perfect efficiency. Calculations ran through quantum cores, weighing profit against loss, strategic value against expenditure. Analysis complete, announced Central Node Alpha 7. Zelani technology offers moderate value. However, conflict with Korthic Dominion presents 73.6% probability of fleet losses exceeding 40%. Economic projections indicate negative return on investment. What of moral considerations? Asked a newer AI, its programming still influenced by the organic creators they had long since replaced. Moral subroutines do not override profit algorithms, came the cold response. The collective declines involvement. The Turian Empire received the message during their evening war games. The bird-like aliens gathered in their military academies, discussing tactics and strategy while their homeworld's 3 moons rose over martial training grounds. General Charictus studied the tactical reports with professional interest. The Korthic fleet is formidable, he mused, his feathered crest rising with excitement. It would be glorious to test our strength against such worthy opponents. But what strategic value does Zelaris Prime offer us? Asked his aide. They are pacifists with no military infrastructure. Even if we win, we gain little. Victory is its own reward, Charictus argued. Not according to the Senate. They want guarantees of territorial gain or resource rights. The general's crest fell in disappointment. Then we watch and learn. Perhaps the Korthic will reveal new tactics we can study. Across the galaxy, the pattern repeated. The hegemony of free worlds expressed deep concern but claimed their forces were committed elsewhere. The Crystalline Fellowship offered sanctuary to refugees, but no military aid. The trade union calculated shipping costs for evacuation vessels, but balked at combat deployment. On Zolaris Prime, the situation grew desperate. The Korthik bombardment intensified as their main fleet arrived. Admiral Zektar, a massive reptilian creature with scales black as space itself, stood on his flagship's bridge watching the beautiful world burn. "Send them our terms," he ordered. His voice a rumbling growl that made his crew shiver. "Surrender their resources willingly, and we grant them quick deaths. Resist and they become slaves in our mining colonies." The ultimatum reached Vex High just as another orbital station exploded in brilliant white fire. She looked around the command center at her fellow Zelani, their crystal bodies dim with fear and despair. "Broadcast again," she whispered. "Someone must answer. Someone must care." But as the hours passed, only polite refusals and expressions of sympathy filled their receivers. The great civilizations of the galaxy had spoken. The Zelani would face extinction alone. In the crystal towers below, families huddled together as Korthik fighters screamed overhead. Children, who had never heard the sound of weapons fire, now cowered at explosions that shook their gleaming homes. The peaceful gardens where Zelani had meditated for centuries became shelters from falling debris. "Why won't they help us?" asked the young Krayeth, her crystal form barely more than a child's outline. "We've done nothing wrong. We've helped anyone who asked." Her parent, Telanari, wrapped protective arms around the young one's trembling form. "Sometimes, little light, the universe is darker than we wish it to be." Above them, Vex High continued broadcasting. Her voice grew hoarse, her crystal form flickering with exhaustion, but she would not stop. Somewhere in the vast galaxy, someone had to be listening. Someone had to care about 1 billion innocent lives. But as the second day began and the Korthak ships moved into final attack positions, hope faded like starlight before dawn. The galaxy had made its choice. The civilized worlds would let the Zelani die rather than risk their own comfort and safety. The quantum transmitters continued their desperate calls into the void, carrying the pleas of a dying world to anyone who might still have compassion in their hearts. 3 days had passed since the Zelani first cried for help, and their beautiful world was dying. The crystal cities that had sparkled like jewels now showed dark scars where Korthik weapons had carved through their gleaming surfaces. Smoke rose from what had once been peaceful gardens, and the rainbow light that danced through the crystal towers grew dimmer with each passing hour. Vex High had not left her post at the communication array. Her crystal form, once bright and clear, now flickered like a dying candle. Around her, the command center buzzed with desperate activity as her people tried to coordinate the evacuation of the outer colonies. "The mining colony on Zolaris 7 has gone silent," reported Captain Morden, his voice heavy with grief. Their last transmission showed Korthik landing craft approaching. Vex High closed her eyes, feeling the weight of another failed world on her shoulders. Zolaris 7 had been home to 50,000 Zelani, all of them now either dead or worse. The Korthik did not believe in quick deaths for those who resisted. "Continue broadcasting," she ordered. "Every frequency, every language. Someone must hear us." But the responses that came back were always the same. The Asari Confederation sent another message of sympathy, along with an offer to accept 500 refugee families if they could somehow reach Asari space. The Turian Empire transmitted detailed battle reports from previous Korthak encounters, supposedly for educational purposes. The trade union offered cut-rate shipping for any Zelani who could pay for passage off Dash World, though none offered to fight. On the bridge of his flagship, Bone Crusher, Admiral Zektar watched the destruction with satisfaction. The Korthik were known throughout the galaxy for their efficiency in conquest, and this campaign was proceeding exactly as planned. The peaceful Zelani offered little resistance, and their crystal cities shattered beautifully under his weapons. "Admiral," his communications officer hissed. The scaled creature's voice filled with amusement. "We're intercepting more desperate broadcasts from the surface. Should we jam their transmissions?" Zektar's massive head turned toward the speaker, his yellow eyes gleaming with cruel humor. "No, let them keep begging. I want the entire galaxy to hear their pleas and know that no one is coming to help them." He activated his own broadcast array, sending his message on the same frequencies the Zilani used for their desperate calls. "Greetings, civilized worlds," his voice rumbled across space. "I am Admiral Zektar of the Korthak Dominion. You have been listening to the death cries of Zelaris Prime for 3 days now. I find it amusing that none of you have responded with anything but words." He paused, letting his laughter echo across the transmission. "The Zilani offer you their technology in exchange for their lives. I offer you something better. Watch and learn how easily your precious civilization can be stripped away. Today, it is the Crystal Dwellers. Tomorrow, it might be you. Remember this moment when you chose profit over principle, comfort over courage." The transmission ended, leaving the galaxy to contemplate the truth in his words. In the golden halls of the Asari Confederation, Councilor Thesara found herself unable to concentrate on the trade negotiations before her. The recorded pleas from Zelaris Prime played in her mind, especially the voices of the children. "Perhaps we should reconsider," suggested a junior counselor. "The Zilani offer is quite generous, and the cost would bankrupt 3 sectors," Thesara replied firmly. "We have responsibilities to our own people first." But even as she spoke the words, doubt gnawed at her. The Asari had once been explorers and protectors, spreading hope throughout the galaxy. When had they become mere accountants, measuring lives against credit balances? Across the galaxy, similar scenes played out. The Nexus Collective ran new calculations, factoring in the propaganda value of intervention, but still concluded that action was inadvisable. The Turian Empire's generals argued among themselves about honor versus practicality, but the Senate remained firm in their refusal. On Zelaris Prime, refugee ships struggled to escape the doomed world. These vessels had never been designed for such desperate flight. Many were simple transport shuttles, pressed into service to carry families away from their crystalline homes. One such ship, the Harmony's Light, limped through space carrying 2,000 Zilani refugees. Its captain, Yeltar, had been a tour guide just a week ago, showing visitors the wonders of their crystal cities. Now he piloted a ship filled with the survivors of those same cities. "Captain," his navigator called out, her voice tight with fear. "Korthak interceptors approaching. They're demanding we stop for inspection." Yeltar knew what that meant. The Korthak did not inspect refugee ships. They enslaved or destroyed them. He had women and children aboard, beings who had never known violence until this week. "Send a distress signal," he ordered. "Tell the galaxy what's happening here." The transmission went out, carrying images of families huddled together in terror, of children too frightened to cry, of a civilization dying while the galaxy watched. The message reached every major world, was discussed in every parliament and council, and still no one came. The Korthak interceptors closed in. Yeltar watched them approach, knowing he had no weapons, no shields. Nothing but the desperate hope that someone, somewhere, might finally act. Far away, on a small blue planet at the edge of known space, an emergency transmission crackled through the communication center of the Terran Federation. The night shift operator, a young woman named Sarah Martinez, had been monitoring routine shipping traffic when the Zilani broadcasts began appearing on her screens. She listened to the desperate pleas, watched the images of crystal cities burning, saw the refugee ships fleeing into space. Unlike the great powers of the galaxy, Humanity was new to the galactic community. They had no vast fleets, no massive territories, no ancient traditions of measured response. What they had was something that the older civilizations seemed to have lost somewhere. Along the way, Sarah reached for the emergency alert button without hesitation. Within minutes, alarms were sounding in military bases across human space. The message was simple and direct. 1 billion innocent people were dying, and they had asked for help. In the halls of the Terran Federation Council, emergency sessions were called. But unlike the endless debates that paralyzed other governments, the human response was swift and unanimous. They had heard people crying for help. That was enough. President Chun received the final authorization at 0347 Earth Standard Time. Her orders to the Third Fleet were brief and clear. Proceed to Zalaris Prime. Protect innocent life. Come home safe. Admiral Sarah Chun, the President's younger sister. Read the orders aboard her flagship, Defiance. Around her, 46 other ships of the human fleet prepared for the longest jump in their history. They were heading into a battle they might not win, against an enemy that had already proven too strong for the galaxy's great powers. But they were going anyway, because sometimes doing the right thing mattered more than doing the smart thing. As the human fleet charged their jump drives, Vaxhai continued her broadcasts from the dying world of Zalaris Prime. She did not know that someone had finally heard her. She did not know that help was coming. All she knew was that her people were dying, and the galaxy remained silent. The emergency session of the Terran Federation Council lasted exactly 47 minutes. In the marbled halls of New Geneva, representatives from every human world had gathered via holographic link. Their faces grim as they watched the broadcasts of Zalaris Prime. President Elena Chun stood at the central podium, her silver hair catching the chamber lights. Behind her, massive screens displayed the desperate transmissions from the dying crystal world. Children's faces looked out from refugee ships. Cities burned in rainbow flames. "The situation is clear," she said, her voice carrying to every corner of human space. 1 billion innocent people face extinction. They have asked for our help. Councillor Zhang from the Mars colonies raised his hand. "Madam President, we've only been part of the galactic community for 30 years. We don't have the resources that the older civilizations possess. Our entire fleet is smaller than a single Asari battle group. Are you suggesting we do nothing?" President Chun asked quietly. Zhang hesitated, looking at the images of Zolani families fleeing their crystal homes. "I'm suggesting we consider our limitations." "Our limitations?" The voice came from Admiral Sarah Chun, appearing on screen from the bridge of her flagship. The family resemblance was clear in her sharp features and determined eyes. "We have 47 ships ready to fight. The Zolani have 0. That makes us their best hope." Councillor Petrov from Europa Station leaned forward. "Admiral Chun, the tactical reports show the Korthik fleet has 80 ships, many of them larger than our heaviest cruisers. The mathematical odds of success are irrelevant," President Chun interrupted. "We're not here to debate mathematics. We're here to decide what kind of people we want to be." The chamber fell silent. On the screens, another Zolani city crumbled under Korthik bombardment. The Ezeri have 1,000 ships but claim they can't spare any. The Turians have the finest military in the galaxy, but say it's not strategically sound. The Nexus Collective has calculated that compassion doesn't generate profit. President Chun's voice grew stronger with each word. Every great power in the galaxy has found a reason to let these people die. She paused, looking directly into the cameras that connected her to every human world. "I believe we are better than that. I believe that when innocent people cry for help, you answer that cry. Not because it's profitable, not because it's strategically sound. You answer because it's the right thing to do. The vote was unanimous. Within 6 hours. The Third Fleet of the Terran Federation was moving towards Zolaris Prime. It was not an impressive sight by galactic standards. The flagship Defiance was barely 5 years old, built in the orbital shipyards above Luna. Most of the other ships were even newer, designed by humans who were still learning the basics of galactic warfare. Admiral Sarah Chun stood on her bridge, watching the star charts as her navigation officer plotted their course. The bridge crew was young, eager, and utterly outmatched by what they were about to face. Admiral called out her tactical officer, Lieutenant James Morrison. We're receiving a priority transmission from the Galactic Council. Put it through. The holographic image of Counselor Vex Thani, an Asari with ancient eyes and elaborate robes, appeared before them. Her expression was one of barely contained irritation. Admiral Chun, the Galactic Council formally protests this unauthorized military intervention. The Terran Federation lacks the authority to engage in major fleet actions without Council approval. Sarah Chun smiled coldly. Counselor, with all due respect, where does the Council get the authority to condemn 1 billion people to death? This is not about condemnation. This is about proper procedure, and it's about a bunch of politicians who are too comfortable to risk their own people for strangers. Admiral Chun interrupted. We'll file the proper paperwork after we save some lives. The transmission ended with Vex Thani's outraged expression frozen on screen for a moment before dissolving. Well, said Morrison cheerfully, we've officially annoyed the galaxy's most powerful alliance. That has to be some kind of record. It's a start, Admiral Chun replied. Now let's see if we can annoy the Korthik as well. The human fleet made their final jump at 1,347 hours Earth Standard Time. 47. Ships dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Zolaris system, their sensors immediately detecting the chaos ahead. The Korthik fleet hung in space around the crystal world like a swarm of black insects. 80 ships, just as the intelligence reports had indicated. Admiral Chun could see the massive bulk of the Korthik flagship. Bone Crusher, leading the formation. Communications. Send a message on all frequencies, Admiral Chun ordered. All channels open. Admiral. She took a deep breath, thinking of the faces on those refugee ships. Of the children cowering in crystal cities. Attention Korthik fleet. This is Admiral Sarah Chun of the Terran Federation Third Fleet. You are engaged in the unlawful attack on civilian populations. You have one opportunity to withdraw peacefully. The response came quickly, filled with rumbling laughter. Admiral Zektar's massive form appeared on their screens, his yellow eyes gleaming with amusement. Humans. The galaxy's newest children come to play at war. I have 80 ships, Little Admiral. You have barely 50. Do you truly wish to die for strangers? Admiral Chun looked around her bridge at the young faces of her crew. They were afraid. She could see it in their eyes. But they were here anyway, because sometimes fear didn't matter as much as doing what was right. Admiral Zektar, you seem to misunderstand something about humans. We don't calculate odds when innocent people are dying. We just act. Then you will die foolishly. Maybe, but we'll die fighting for something that matters. Can you say the same? The channel closed, leaving the human fleet alone in space with an enemy that outnumbered them nearly 2-1. Admiral Chun looked at her tactical display, studying the Korthik formation. Morrison, what's your assessment? The young tactical officer studied his screens. Well, Admiral, they have more ships, bigger guns, and thicker armor. On the plus side, we're fighting for something we believe in. That's enough, Admiral Chun said quietly. Signal the fleet. All ships, prepare for combat. We came here to save lives, and that's exactly what we're going to do. Across the fleet, human ships powered up their weapons and shields. The converted mining vessel, New Johannesburg, armed its plasma cutters. The exploration ship Endeavour loaded its makeshift torpedo tubes. 47 ships carrying 20,000 human souls prepared to face an enemy that had conquered worlds. But as the two fleets moved toward each other, something unexpected happened. From Zolaris Prime came a new transmission, weak but clear. Unknown human fleet, this is Communications Director Vex High. We did not expect anyone to come. Thank you for answering our call. Admiral Chun smiled, thinking of her sister's words in the council chambers. This was what it meant to be human. Not the smartest species in the galaxy, not the strongest or the richest, but the ones who answered when others cried for help. You're welcome, Director. Now let's see about getting you out of this mess. The space around Zolaris Prime erupted into chaos as the two fleets clashed. The Korthik ships moved in perfect formation, their dark hulls bristling with weapons designed for the systematic destruction of worlds. Against them, the human fleet scattered like a school of fish avoiding a predator. Admiral Chun watched the tactical display as her ships spread out, refusing to present the concentrated target that Korthik doctrine expected. It was the first surprise in what would become a battle full of them. Morrison signaled the mining ships. Execute Plan Delta. On the converted vessel New Johannesburg, Captain Maria Santos received the order with grim satisfaction. Her ship had spent 20 years cutting asteroids apart. Today, she would find out if Korthak armor was any tougher than space rock. The mining ship dove toward the Korthak formation, its industrial-grade plasma cutters charging to full power. The Korthik commanders watched with amused contempt as the ugly, utilitarian vessel approached their sleek destroyers. Admiral Zektar's laughter rumbled across the communication channels. Look at them! They send mining equipment against warships. These humans are even more primitive than I thought. His amusement died as the New Johannesburg fired. The plasma cutters, designed to slice through asteroid cores, carved through the nearest Korthik destroyer's hull like paper. The warship broke apart in a brilliant explosion, its debris scattering across space. Impossible! Zektar roared. Focus fire on that mining ship. But the humans had already moved to the next phase of their unconventional assault. The exploration vessel Endeavour, commanded by Captain Yuki Tanaka, had spent its career studying stellar phenomena. Its crew knew more about solar radiation and magnetic fields than most university professors did. As Korthik ships converged on the New Johannesburg, the Endeavour moved into position near Zolaris Prime star. Captain Tanaka had noticed something in the initial sensor sweeps that the Korthik had missed. The local star was approaching a solar maximum, its surface churning with magnetic storms. Activate the solar array, Tanaka ordered. Full extension. The Endeavour's research equipment deployed, designed to study solar radiation up close. But Tanaka had made a few modifications during the journey to Zolaris Prime. The solar collection array now functioned as a massive focusing lens. Target acquired, her weapons officer announced. Korthik heavy cruiser, bearing 27 Mark IV. Fire. The focused solar energy struck the Korthik cruiser like the wrath of an angry star. Its shields overloaded instantly, and its hull began to glow white-hot. The mighty warship listed to one side, its weapons offline, its crew scrambling to evacuate dot across the battlefield. Human ships fought with desperate creativity. The cargo hauler Beijing Express used its loading cranes to grab and fling debris at Korthik fighters. The passenger liner Golden Gate had rigged its emergency pods as guided missiles. Nothing was as it seemed in this battle, but the Korthik were learning to adapt. Admiral Zektar reorganized his fleet, sending his fastest ships to hunt down the human vessels one by one. The humans were clever, but they were still outnumbered on the bridge of the Defiance, Admiral Chun watched as 3 of her destroyers were overwhelmed by a Korthik assault squadron. The Marathon disappeared in a flash of white light. The Courage limped away on emergency power, its hull breached in a dozen places. "Admiral," Lieutenant Morrison called out, his voice tight. "We're losing ships faster than we can replace them. The Korthik are adapting to our tactics." Chun nodded grimly. She had expected this. Surprise could only carry them so far against a numerically superior enemy. But the battle had served its purpose. The Korthik fleet was no longer focused on the helpless Zilani below. "Signal all refugee ships," she ordered. "Begin evacuation procedures. We'll buy you as much time as we can." From the crystal cities below, Vexhai watched the impossible battle raging overhead. The humans had actually come. These beings she had never met, from a world she had never seen, were dying to protect her people. "Director," her aide called urgently. "The human admiral is requesting targeting data for our remaining orbital platforms." Vexhai moved to her console with renewed hope. The Zilani platforms had been designed for asteroid defense and scientific research, but they had powerful sensors and a few mining lasers. Perhaps they could help their unexpected saviors. "Transfer all our sensor data to the human fleet," she ordered, "and activate the remaining platforms. If the humans are willing to die for us, the least we can do is fight beside them." The tide of battle began to shift as Zilani orbital platforms added their fire to the human assault. The platform's mining lasers were weak compared to military weapons, but they could target specific systems with scientific precision. Admiral Zektar watched in growing fury as his flagship shields flickered under combined human and Zilani fire. These should have been easy victories against inferior technology. Instead, his fleet was being carved apart by converted civilian vessels and research equipment. "Enough!" he roared, all ships ramming speed. "If they want to die so badly, we'll accommodate them." The massive Korthik flagship Bone Crusher accelerated toward the human fleet, its hull bristling with weapons. Other Korthik ships followed, abandoning tactics for sheer brute force. Admiral Chun saw them coming and made a decision that would haunt her for the rest of her life. "All ships. This is Admiral Chun. I'm transmitting new orders to each vessel. Execute immediately." Across the human fleet, ship captains opened their sealed orders and read the same message: "Protect the evacuation ships at all costs. That is our mission. That is our duty." Captain Santos of the New Johannesburg was the first to act. Her mining ship, already damaged from the earlier assault, turned directly toward the approaching Bone Crusher. Her crew understood without needing to be told. "It's been an honor, people," Santos announced over the ship's intercom. "Today we proved that humans don't abandon those who need help." The New Johannesburg struck the Korthik flagship head-on at full velocity. The explosion lit up space like a newborn star, and when the light faded, both ships were gone. But the sacrifice bought precious time. Human reinforcements, called from every corner of Terran space, began arriving in waves. The destroyers, Yorktown and Trafalgar, dropped out of hyperspace, followed by the heavy cruiser Nelson and a dozen escort vessels. Admiral Zektar stared at his tactical display in disbelief. How did such a young species have so many ships willing to fight? Where did they find crews ready to die for strangers? The answer came from the bridge of the newly arrived Nelson, where Admiral Rodriguez broadcast on all frequencies. "This is Admiral Rodriguez of the Terran Second Fleet. We heard you folks needed some help out here. Apologies for the delay, but we came as fast as we could." The Korthak formation, already bloodied by the desperate human defense, found itself facing fresh ships with crews eager for battle. The tide had turned, and Admiral Zektar knew it as the second wave of human ships engaged his fleet. Zektar made a calculation that his warrior's pride barely allowed. His forces had taken heavy casualties against an enemy that should have been swept aside in minutes. More human ships were undoubtedly coming. "Signal the fleet," he ordered, his voice bitter with defeat. "We withdraw." But even in retreat, the Korthak commander had one last surprise. As his ships began to disengage, he targeted the planet below with his heaviest weapons. "If we cannot have this world," he snarled, "then no one can." The final barrage from the Korthak flagship lit up Zelaris Prime's atmosphere like falling stars. But the deadly weapons never reached the crystal cities below. Admiral Chun had anticipated this last act of spite, and the human fleet was ready. Every ship capable of firing intercepted the incoming barrage. Missiles exploded in brilliant flashes high above the planet's surface. Energy beams were deflected by coordinated shield bursts. The few weapons that penetrated the defensive screen struck empty ground, leaving craters where crystal gardens once bloomed. But claiming no lives. Admiral Zektar watched his final revenge fail and felt something he had never experienced before: genuine respect for an enemy. "Signal retreat," he ordered quietly. "All ships withdraw to hyperspace." As the Korthak fleet limped away into the darkness, the space around Zelaris Prime fell silent except for the gentle hum of rescue operations. Human ships moved among the debris, searching for survivors and coordinating with the Zelani evacuation vessels. Admiral Chun stood on her bridge, looking out at the crystal world that still glowed with rainbow light, despite the scars of battle. The cost had been heavy. 17 human ships had been destroyed, and over 3,000 crew members had given their lives for people they had never met. "Admiral," Lieutenant Morrison called softly, "we're receiving a transmission from the planet's surface." The image of Communications Director Vexhai appeared on the main screen. Her crystal form was brighter than before, pulsing with emotions that translated as gratitude too deep for words. "Admiral Chun," she began, her voice carrying across space to reach every ship in the human fleet. "I do not have words in any language to express what your people have done today. You came when no one else would answer. You fought when others calculated odds. You sacrificed when the galaxy chose comfort." She paused, and around her, other Zelani appeared on the screen. Families with children, elderly beings whose crystal forms had seen centuries pass. Young adults whose cities had been saved by human courage. "We pledged our technology to anyone who would help us," Vexhai continued. "But you have given us something more valuable than any database or energy formula. You have shown us that there are still beings in this galaxy who believe that some things matter more than profit or politics." Admiral Chun felt the weight of those words. Around her, the bridge crew stood quietly, thinking of the friends they had lost and the world they had saved. "Director," Chun replied, "we didn't come here for rewards or technology. We came because it was the right thing to do." "Which is exactly why you deserve both," Vexhai said, with what might have been a smile. "The Zelani people formally request alliance with the Terran Federation, not as trade partners or political allies, but as family. We pledge our knowledge, our resources, and our lives to stand with those who stood with us." The offer sent shockwaves through the galaxy. Zelani energy synthesis technology was centuries ahead of anything other species possessed. Their medical advances could revolutionize healthcare across known space. The economic implications alone were staggering, but the political implications were even more significant. Within hours of the Korthak retreat, Admiral Chun began receiving communications from across the galaxy. The first came from an unexpected source. Captain Korvash of the Hegemony Defense Force appeared on her screen, his insectoid features clicking with what translated as admiration. "Admiral Chun, I commanded a patrol squadron near the Hegemony border when we received word of your battle. My government chose not to act, but my crew and I, we wish to know if your Federation accepts volunteers. Before Chun could respond, more transmissions flooded in. Captain Yilandra of the Free Colonies Fleet, Commander Thexanol of the Outer Rim Alliance, dozens of individual ship commanders, entire squadrons, even some smaller governments began reaching out. They had watched the battle through long-range sensors and intelligence networks. They had seen 47 human ships face 80 Korthik vessels for no reason except compassion. They had witnessed the impossible victory that followed. More importantly, they had seen what the great powers of the galaxy had not, that there was another way to live among the stars. On Asari Prime, Councilor Zara sat in her luxurious office overlooking the golden spires of the capital city. Before her, intelligence reports detailed the battle at Zalaris Prime and its aftermath. The humans had not only won an impossible victory, but they were now being offered alliance by one of the galaxy's most technologically advanced species. The economic projections are troubling, her aide reported. If the Terran Federation gains access to Zalani technology, they could dominate several market sectors within a decade. Zara nodded absently, but her mind was elsewhere. She was thinking of the refugee ships, of the children's faces she had seen in the broadcasts from Zalaris Prime. Had the Asari really become so cold that they would let innocents die rather than risk their investments? Schedule a meeting with the Terran ambassador, she said quietly. It's time we discussed our relationship with the Federation. The pattern repeated across the galaxy. The Nexus Collective began calculating the moral subroutines they had dismissed as irrelevant. The Turian Empire's officers questioned orders that valued territory over honor. The trade union discovered that some things could not be bought or sold, but it was the smaller powers, the forgotten worlds and overlooked species, that responded most dramatically to humanity's example. The mining colonies of Kepler's Edge, who had petitioned the Galactic Council for protection from raiders for years, formally requested Terran Federation membership. The agricultural worlds of the Green Belt Alliance offered food and supplies to any human colony that needed them. A dozen Meyer species sent delegations to Earth, seeking not trade deals or defense pacts, but simple alliance based on shared values. 6 months after the Battle of Zalaris Prime, Admiral Sarah Chun found herself standing in the crystal halls of the reconstructed Zalani capital. She was attending the signing of the Mutual Defense Charter, a document that formalized the alliance between humanity and its new partners. President Elena Chun, who had traveled from Earth for the ceremony, stood beside her sister as representatives from 47 worlds added their names to the charter. These were not the great powers of the galaxy, but they represented something new, an alliance based on principles rather than profit. It's remarkable, President Chen said quietly as she watched a delegation of rescued Korthik prisoners voluntarily join the alliance. A year ago, we were barely recognized by the Galactic Council. Now we're leading a coalition of free worlds. It's not about leadership, Admiral Chun replied, thinking of the crew members who had died at Zalaris Prime. It's about remembering what matters. The galaxy forgot that somewhere along the way. Vexai approached them, her crystal form now fully restored and brighter than before. In her hands, she carried a small device that hummed with contained energy. Admiral Chun, President Chun, she said formally. On behalf of all Zalani, I present to you the first gift of our alliance. She activated the device, and a hologram appeared in the air between them. It showed the galaxy as it had been 6 months ago. Vast empires controlling trade and politics. Smaller worlds existing at the mercy of their powerful neighbors. Species suffering in isolation while the great powers debated proper procedures. Then, the image changed, showing the galaxy as it was now. New connections appeared between worlds that had never spoken before. Trade routes opened between species that the old powers had kept separate. Alliance networks spread like growing flowers, connecting worlds through shared purpose rather than economic necessity. "You asked for nothing," Rek'Sai said. "But you have given the galaxy something it had lost: hope. Hope that someone will answer when the desperate call for help. Hope that doing right matters more than doing well. Hope that the strong will protect the weak simply because it is the right thing to do." Admiral Chun looked at the holographic galaxy, seeing the new connection spreading like light through darkness. Humanity had not conquered this galaxy or claimed dominion over it. They had simply reminded it what it could become. That evening, as the celebrations continued in the crystal halls, Admiral Chun stood alone on a balcony overlooking the rebuilt city. The rainbow lights danced through the air as they had for centuries before the Korthak came. Lieutenant Morrison found her there, looking up at the stars where human ships patrolled alongside their new allies. "No regrets, Admiral?" he asked. Chun smiled, thinking of the 17 ships they had lost, of the friends who would never see this rebuilt world, of the impossible odds they had faced for people they barely knew. "None," she said firmly. "Sometimes the right choice is also the hard choice. That doesn't make it any less right." Above them, the stars shone down on a galaxy that was slowly learning to be better than it had been. The great powers still existed, still controlled vast territories and resources. But they no longer controlled hope, that belonged to anyone willing to answer when the desperate called for help.